Okay, we're live. Mohammed,
Hello.
your mother has joined.
Hello.
Hi, Joyce. So, should we get started? Let's have
Yes.
more people join along the way. So, first of all, good evening, afternoon to you.
Yeah, it's evening here, 7 p.m. But when I have my own podcast, I always say good morning, even though it's like way later in my neck of the woods. But it's normal, so
Ah,
it's fine.
I see. Well,
Yeah.
this thing here, I have coffee. Why don't you share? There's Jonathan joining us. Where you're zooming or substacking live from, and we'll get started.
Well, right now I'm in Jordan, so if anybody else wants to share where they're at, that would be great.
Yeah, great idea. I'm calling in this morning from Chico, California. And I see we've got people from all over the world here. So yeah, I have invited Mohammed Raei to have a live discussion that we're thinking will turn into a co-authored article after the discussion today. Um, and my main interest in joining Mohammed this morning was because of his edited book, Leadership at the Spiritual Edge: Emerging and Non-Western Concepts of Leadership and Spirituality, a topic that also interests me. Mohammed is a leadership and organization development scholar and consultant like myself. He also specializes in adaptive leadership and adult development. So we have a common field that we share. We just met up last month in Prague at the ILA conference, had some lunch, and we're discussing different topics. And so here we are live with whoever joins the call. You're all part of the discussion as well. So Mohammed, take it wherever you'd like to start.
Well, I will start where it started for me, which was I by chance or whatever luck, destiny, I started meditating, and maybe 45 days later, I had a Kundalini awakening. And for those who might have heard of Kundalini through Kundalini yoga or some other yoga, or just heard horror stories on the internet, it's an energy that the person can feel in their body, often at the bottom of the spine. And this energy supposedly goes up through the chakras until it reaches the crown chakra at the top of the head. And when it reaches the crown, supposedly you get enlightened. But of course, that's that's a lot of exaggeration. But it allows you to have spiritual experiences, and it expands consciousness, albeit for some in some cases temporarily. So after I started meditating, I experienced this initial Kundalini awakening, and there were other spiritual experiences after it. But from that, even when I started meditating, I started reading about spirituality. I spent like almost 4 years just studying the topic. And after my first book on adaptive leadership, I decided I wanted to edit another anthology on spirituality and leadership this time. And I recruited two co-editors, Lisa Berkeley and Stacy Gunter. And so I don't want to make it like, oh, I created the whole book. That's not the case. I had co-editors, and there were the contributions from 15 or 20 different people. So, and there were a lot of teams in the book. I only wrote one chapter in it, and we co-authored the introduction. So I don't want to make it appear as, I wrote the whole book. That's not the case. But there were several themes in the book, and my own contribution was around the idea of surrender, which was also a um, um, something that showed up in other chapters. And then I had another contribution around compassion and fake cues of mindfulness, what people refer to as spiritual bypassing. One big theme for me was early on, even when I started my meditation practice, I read a book called After the Ecstasy, the Laundry by Jack Kornfield. And basically it said, after you have all of these experiences, you still have to do the laundry. And then I read Jeff Brown's many books. One of them is called Grounded Spirituality. So even from the get go, I had that groundedness, and I wanted that to show up in the book, where I used a quote from I can't remember his name. He's the person who invented the term spiritual bypassing. He was one of the first Buddhist psychologists in the West, and he talked about heaven and earth. So in the book, I used the quote that you need to have both heaven and earth, the transcendent, these amazing experiences, but also at the same time, stay in the game. You're not just, trying to seek nirvana and just abandoning the world. You have work to do, the laundry.
Yeah, there's so much here. It seems like the themes, surrender and groundedness. Groundedness seems to have a relationship with spiritual bypassing. I'm wondering if one of these themes interests you to dig into more. And I also wonder if people here on the call might have questions about these themes as we discuss them.
Sure. I mean, for me, groundedness, let's start with that and spiritual bypassing. So, when the person is trying to use spirituality to escape reality, that's the opposite of groundedness. Um, Groundedness is being in the here and now, not in the future and out there. So staying with whatever is happening inside us or in the moment. Of course, occasionally, like if I'm super angry, yeah, sure, I go meditate to calm myself down. But if that's the general attitude that you're constantly wanting to escape your problems, escape your reality, I call it spiritual escapism. So these three kind of mix together, like spiritual bypassing, ungroundedness, and spiritual escapism. And for me, I consider these some of the key characteristics, the bad characteristics of the New Age spirituality, which I have a like big beef with. And it's not that it doesn't have a good premise. The idea that we are entering a new age of enlightenment, that's very cool. I mean, that's what people in the 60s thought. They're like, oh, it's the new age, the age of Aquarius, all this, but it hasn't manifested because they were spiritual bypassing, they were seeking the heaven without earth.
Uh-huh. Yeah, wasn't groundedness. So in your research and in your work currently, what are some of your thoughts about how organizational leaders or anyone in that matter could um practice ways of spirituality in their work and groundedness in a balanced, more whole ecosystem or whole manner? What might that look like? Like, what are some of the practices that scholars in this area might talk about?
So I like the word that you used, whole manner, because it brings for me wholeness. So what does wholeness mean? It means, I mean, there are levels of wholeness, but it means that you're including every possible part and it just keeps expanding. Um, so part of wholeness is shadow work. This is coming from integral psychology, Ken Wilber's work. Uh, so asking myself, am I projecting something onto other people? Am I projecting my own preferences, my own problems? Am I seeing what's not there because I refuse to see it in myself? And it's so hard for people because 99.9% of the time, all the other people can see your shadow, but you can't see it yourself.
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
it's very interesting.
so that element of shadow work. The other part is asking oneself, am I using spirituality to escape, to avoid my problems, to avoid dealing with, if somebody says you're rude or something. That's something I hear, like not in my case, but let's say something I hear from a lot of people, and I dismiss it. And then I go and meditate. Am I trying to, by meditating, to calm myself down? so that I don't deal with my own shit. Um, that part, avoiding responsibility. Do I blame other people? Um, am I playing the victim? Is it always the other people? If it's always the other people, it's probably me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So asking myself, is there a pattern where it's always them who did it? It's always this. There was one exercise. I was trained by a guy by the name of Bob Crosby, and he trained in T groups in 1953. He still is around, and he's 96 now. When I trained with him, he was 85 years old, and he's still amazing. He sings. He's still active as much as he can. And I learned this exercise from him. In a group, you ask people, in order for the organization or whatever to reach its goals, what needs to happen. And he did this exercise with 20 people, and everybody, he had two columns, and in the right hand column it's something about other people, and in the left hand column it's something about me, and every single person said something that other people needed to do, not what they needed to do. So there's this skirting of responsibility. Am I expecting just others to change without myself changing, or am I doing my part?
Yes. Yeah, I actually connect with that idea in a very big way. For me, I see one of the big problems we have with what we call leadership in the world is that we project a lot of expectations and give up a lot of our own personal powers and freedoms to whoever we perceive to be in a the ultimate position of power, because someone might have authority to make certain decisions for us in government and organizations. And I feel like I see too many people looking up to the leader as the person that should solve all problems and do make everything wonderful. And yet here we are when most people are complaining about, admin and leadership and leaders as like a very bad thing. And I wonder how we can shift and get to a place collectively, locally and globally, where we understand the ecosystem of leadership and including the followers as leaders and the leaders themselves as really good followers, knowing when to follow and listen to input from the organization. So I wonder how that connects with what you're sharing as well.
So it's interesting that the English language, which is not my native language, has the capital letter and the lowercase letter, whereas in Arabic, there's no such thing. And what's interesting is most people, when they think about leadership, they think about capital L leadership. The hero, JFK, something like this. The big boss. But really, like leadership 90% of the time is the lowercase L leadership. And what I mean by that is even so I co-authored a chapter with also my co-editor for my first book, and it was about the role of middle manager. And what we argued was that the role is not like to do something, but it's actually to prevent damage from upper management. So even when upper management requests something, you can delay it, not take action. So people usually think leadership is about taking action, but a lot of the time it's just about not doing anything. Management wants something, but you can, come up with excuses and to protect your team. It's not that you don't want stuff, but the what think I can't remember what the theory is, but it says basically that top management just has 3% of the information because they're not down in the trenches. And so, it doesn't need to be, people think leadership needs to be big actions, but it can be small actions or non actions.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm already just like thinking of the metaphor, the trenches. It's like a war metaphor. You've got people down here, you've got someone up there. So, um, yeah, it's interesting. And I think middle management or middle level leaders play a really important role, having been in that position myself for a couple of years in Germany at a school. You know, the research that I read a while ago now was that the middle level leaders are a particular group is really important and vital in the organization because they have access to information that the top leaders don't in both directions. And so they're kind of in the middle. The hard part is that they're not always empowered or authorized to take certain decisions with that information. So they're a little bit stuck in the middle or can be. Um, so yeah, very interesting. I'm back to spiritual bypassing and groundedness. How might that is there more we want to talk about this theme before moving on to surrender?
I think as I said, with shadow work, it's harder for the person to notice it themselves. So if they have people they trust, then um, that's one way to know your shadow. Of course, a lot of people will be in denial about it because it hurts our self image. We don't want to find out that we're like this, asshole or whatever it is. Um, so it's really hard. And at the same time, I want to emphasize that even when we ask people for feedback, some of the people might be projecting their own stuff onto us. So it's not,
Yeah.
there's very little objective feedback. So we have to be discerning. And it's easy for me to say we have to be discerning, but there is no checklist of how to be discerning. It's something, how do you have experience when you don't have experience?
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
it's like you only become discerning after you've been bad metaphor battle tested.
Yeah, it's a good point. I was going to mention this earlier when we were talking about this topic, but it comes up again. It's not clear black and white. If a projection it becomes identified or seen and understood, it's often layered with our own projections or projections from those around us. It can be quite murky and confusing to know what is ours to unpack and what is not because I really feel like in this work of adult development, strong objectivity maybe is a more appropriate term than saying what is objective and what is subjective, because there's always a person behind, making meaning and having histories and emotions and energy in the body that influences what we, uh, how we shape reality, how we interact with other people in the moment based on what is inside of us and what we can see and what we can't see. The shadow referring to those maybe limiting beliefs and experiences inside us that we're not yet aware of. Um, so it's all very, very powerful. In your experience, here's a question for you, Mohammed. What have you learned about supportive practices for leaders to expand their awareness in terms of unpacking shadow elements, and feeling more clear about projections from other and their self.
So I would say one methodology is T groups, and there are many versions of T groups. Some of them are less developed for business, but for business, there is one version where each person there would be two concentric circles, and on the inside the people are talking, and on the outside people would be observing them and giving them feedback. Then after 10 minutes they'd switch, and the people on the inside would be would on the outside would come to the inside, and then they would be getting feedback, but that feedback is very specific. This is what you said, this is my interpretation of what you felt, is that correct? So it's a way to increase emotional intelligence by telling the person, this is what I perceived as your emotional state. The training also offers emotional vocabulary. These are red emotions: anger, frustration, whatever. These are blue emotion: depression, sadness, etc. So you in that training you get the emotional vocabulary. You go in, use it, apply it, observe the person, then you come back. And through like 4 hours a day. You're in and out, 15 minutes debriefing. And then there's the larger debrief where people debrief the whole process for the group. So that's very helpful. The person who is giving the feedback really can be, uh, the feedback might be shocking in some cases because you don't notice how you're coming off. Or you might think that your emotions were very obvious, whereas the other person in the circle or the person on the outside had a much harder time discerning your emotions or misinterpreted them, and that caused conflict.
Yeah. Yeah. I imagine too, a process like this really builds greater coherence in the collective space because the individual has to a bit maybe break down some boundaries or have some permeability to receive input from those around them and also maybe lose part of their identity to join the space and the connection with the group, those around them.
So there is definitely some of that. There is this struggle for people because the T group doesn't have a leader. So there is this struggle of belonging and autonomy. People struggle to find their place in the group, how to be independent, and there is always the confusion around they assume the facilitator is the authority figure, but it's just a facilitator. And there is the focus on the here and now instead of the what's out there. So it's all about the inner dynamics. We're not talking about something that happened yesterday. We're talking about what's happening in the group right now. So it's very real time that you're getting the feedback.
Yeah, yeah. I've had some experiences with this. I don't know that it was exactly named. It was not called T groups, but as you describe it, it's pretty much very close to what Abigail and Jeff offer at Pacific Integral and their Generating Transformative Change program. That's 9 or 10 months. The in-person retreats, which there are four of them during that year, are a lot of T group formations and being in a small group and working with what is emerging in the collective space as well as simultaneously the individual space. And it's quite a powerful experience. I'm guessing we might have some people here even on the call that are have gone through this program or are might be currently in it. Um, but yeah, go ahead.
To talk about I want to talk about something. So because the topic of today is about spirituality, when something in the group clicks, then you can feel this field, you call it spirit, energy, whatever. And then it's amazing. And people leave. There are different names for it: the intersubjective field, group flow, group energy, uh, whatever. You want to use spiritual terminology for it or secular ones, but people leave, they felt that's something. And if they're not ready or they come from a very secular position where they're for them it's the spirituality is woo woo or new age or whatever, they might in retrospect say it didn't happen. But often people, when they feel this click or energy or something, then it can be something that they seek. And even before I became officially spiritual, I felt it when I was facilitating.
Mm.
And it's one of the most beautiful things. And, for a long time, I was like, how do I replicate this? And you can't force it. You can create conditions for it.
Yeah,
Uh, but
it's not a like.
one of the conditions is silence. So one of the conditions is silence. So allowing that silence to last maybe for 5, 10 minutes, people feel something sacred, something, in between them. Uh, so that's one way to do it, but it's not the whole thing. I mean, it takes skill, but sometimes it's just uh, moving to the next pattern, which is a surrender.
Mm, yeah,
The facilitator surrenders into it. You
yes.
know, it's not, you can't force it. You have to surrender.
Huh.
I mean, you're not as a facilitator, you're not telling yourself, "I have to surrender." You tell yourself, "I have to surrender." Then you're forcing it, and because the U.S. culture and Western culture is so control is so ingrained, they try to force surrender. You must surrender.
Yeah. You mean for themselves or for the people they're facilitating with?
Well, you have to start with yourself. It's like
Ye
you have to let it in, and so you can't force the people to surrender either.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. My background is public and private education as a teacher before going into school administration, and yeah, it's a hard lesson for some early educators to learn that, you might have a plan or a lesson plan, but what comes in the classroom each day with a group of 20 or 30 students, really shapes what unfolds in the learning process, and a good teacher can surrender, and be with what is there and present in those students with you that day or that classroom, that class. So let's continue. This is a really, I feel like a very important topic and theme for organizational leaders. And again, it feels like a bit of a polarity, like we discussed with groundedness and spiritual bypassing, or wanting to escape and be in the spiritual realm and energy, but also doing the laundry and being in contact with other humans and the messiness that has. I wonder, in surrender, in your experience at editing, co-authoring these pieces of work, what comes up for you in terms of maybe some polarities or ways to balance and find wholeness?
So there's in I think I don't know Buddhism or uh, Hinduism that the surrendering the fruits of your actions. And um, right now I'm editing a special issue for a journal, guest editing, and the requirement for the journal to publish the special issue is that there would be five articles in the special issues as a minimum. So I'm doing this editing work and rejecting and accepting. And I, yes, I really want so bad for this issue to happen. But at the same time, I know it's not within my control. I can't just ac- accept a poorly written article. Um, so there is a bit of struggle. It's not easy when I have to remind myself not to be attached to the outcome. Maybe the timing is not right. And these articles, even if we don't have the special issue, can make it to the main issue. So there is, even for somebody like me, it's a struggle to sometimes let go of whatever we want. Um, and so I do my part and hope for the best.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good example of surrender. You know, having intentions, taking action, and also letting go, letting come from Theory U and Otto Scharmer's work. Sensing, really kind of being aware and sensitive to the dynamics in our work with others, with tasks, with yeah. How do we find the balance there? So I'm curious. We have 5 people on the call with us. I wonder if there might be any questions for us to discuss more in detail. This is a new experience for Mohammed and I to do a live call on Substack. So I'm just playing around with some of the features on my phone. Um,
Jonathan wrote, I hear them okay.
I
So
hear
I don't know if he's still on the
comment so far. I wonder if we could get some more comments, or did people put in the chat or comment where they're calling from or joining the call from today? That would be
Joyce Hill, Jonathan, Norway, he wrote down. Joyce Hill wrote, can't hear you because it's repeating and echoing.
oh, uh-oh. Can you hear us now, Joyce Hill? Is that okay? Hmm. Can you hear me okay, Mohammed?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. All right. I wonder who the other people are. Let me see if I can click on or find out. Maybe I can't unless they comment. That might be the case. Can you see any other comments? No.
So,
All right.
you know, we can continue. Um, One of the things that I remembered from my book chapter is a quotation about improvisation and how improvisation surrender is central to improvisation. And the link might not be obvious, but when you're improvising, you're letting go of everything you planned. So that's where the surrender comes in. Um, and then there is just now like goosebumps for me. It's just coming back what I wrote, which is surrendering to the present moment.
Yeah. Yeah. So easy to get taken away from the present moment, right? Especially in today's world, I think. So many things grabbing and vying for our attention. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I've talked a bit and I'd like to hear what's also present for you around spirituality.
Yeah. Um, well, I've been working as a consultant and coach to some organizational leaders for the past year, and it's quite a change in how I work. Before, I'd always worked in a school setting that you know the way we worked together was always scripted out with job descriptions and um, yeah, there was some innovation possible and things emerged that were really exciting and fun projects to be a part of. And yet, I found at the finish of my doctoral work a year ago, the work to no longer really be matching how I was wanting to show up in the world, how I was wanting to work. And I suppose this might have to do with spirituality because coming from the United States, working in public education and growing up in the public school system, you know, and even in the US, culturally, I feel like I kind of grew up with this notion that the way we organize ourselves in the world is basically spirit religion over here in this box, everything else over here. And that's how we respect religious diversity and different traditions, supposedly. So, anyways, I guess what I mean to say for me is spirituality very early on when I went into leadership myself became kind of the way to grow and develop as a really humanizing, effective school leader. It was a shock to the system because my previous master's degree and training in school leadership was all, strategic policies, strategic moves, change management, very cognitive and driven, and, you know, a lot of expertise and just kind of executing things. And it kind of felt like it had some good things to offer that worked. And yet, what I found in my early years as a school administrator and in a pretty challenging context organizationally was that it wasn't sufficient for making change happen or for connecting with the humans that I was supposedly changing. I actually learned in those early years that the change was occurring in me. That something in my environment, now that I was in a position with a lot more responsibility to a lot more people in the organization, students, adults, there's a lot more at risk on my shoulders. That a lot more responsibility, and it wasn't always clear how to take action. And it felt like there were immense barriers to my work. That to be effective, it almost felt in that first year completely impossible. And so I was kind of left with what is happening inside of me? Like, how did I arrive at this point where I was this respected middle level leader and really successful in my work and very effective, to then finding myself in a new position with more authority and power and responsibility and feeling completely lost. And it was painful. It was emotionally painful because I think what happened looking back many years later now from this point in time in my life, I can see that I was confronted very abruptly with a lot of shadow elements. And so, fortunately, I had some wonderful spiritual mentors around me, although they might not call themselves that. Maybe, yeah, actually, they probably both would call them not, but that wasn't the nature of our relationship. Like, you be my spiritual mentor. But I was fortunate to have some wise leaders around me who had spiritual lives. And it was not lost on me early on that the two people that felt like lighthouses to me in my leadership development at that time of stepping out into the world in a new way, a very expansive way where I felt very scary. Like, if one false move, I'm gonna fail here, and it could, be a big deal because this is a huge position. And I thought, my goodness, of all the people that are helping me the most, these are two people that have prac like spiritual lives. One of the Muslim tradition, a very progressive, liberal way, a very, very well educated and balanced human being, and then another from the Christian faith. And myself not having a religious identity, I still had reclaimed or held on to a spiritual identity as being and practice of my own. But what happened for me is I began to notice that spirituality and leadership carry a special relationship for me and also for other scholars and thinkers in the world. That good leadership doesn't have to mean it's absent or completely far away from talking about spirituality. And so I guess I'll just pause there. I shared a little bit about the background and why that's important for me because of my own experiences and developing as an adult, as a human, and as a really a leader who embraces surrender and growth. Um, and I'll see what comments you have, and then also if someone else wants to drop in the chat a question. I see we have now 6 viewers, Mohammed. So
We're up by one.
good.
Well, what you said, I want to connect it a bit back with what I said earlier about the T groups and the facilitation. People think that a spiritual leader is, I don't know, whatever. I can't like. People think they have a pre-configured mental model image of what a spiritual leader is, and I think that's a bit damaging and misleading at the same time. And at one level, spirituality is about connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this connection can be, very small, but that energy that I talked about in groups, and in the best organizations, maybe 1-2% of the organization, you feel that in the organization itself, that spirit.
Yeah.
And people will not be comfortable with using that word, but, use whatever you want. uh,
Yeah.
the feel, whatever, it doesn't matter. But I think once people, I use the word spirit because it's been used for millennia now. So when people say spirit, the problem might be that they're conflating it with religion. So they don't want to use that word. And because of the history, the Crusades, all this, the Spanish Inquisition, all of these things, the both religion and spirituality got tainted to some degree. And I think it might be easier for people to accept the word spirit or spirituality as opposed to religion. But also, even scholars say, religion is about structure, obeying rules, all these things, and spirituality is you can do whatever you want. I
Yeah.
mean, not literally, but there's some aspect, some truth to that.
Yeah. 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 Religion too being connected with white supremacy and a lot of, yeah, just a lot of horrible things in our histories have occurred under the name of religion and continue to this day. So that I feel like that's one reason why perhaps there's an edge to discussing spirituality and leadership, which for many might consider spirituality. How does that have a place in leadership? What is that? That's someone's personal religion. We're not going to talk about that. It's up to people to decide. So having this shared vocabulary language around what does that even mean? I taught a well-being class or in 7th grade in Germany for a couple of years, in addition to some of the other courses I taught. And every year, students would ask me, and this is students from 80 different nationalities, Miss, what is spiritual well-being? I mean, is that like religion? And I would say, well, we could think of spirituality as, inquiring into what does it mean to be a good human? Really, if that's what it's about in connection with one another. Um, I know when I do some small group exercises and some workshops on embodied leadership, I often discover how slowing down and connecting with another human in front of you feels almost too intimate to enter into that space. There's a lot of fear or discomfort. And
Uh,
yeah,
Go ahead, finish, and
I wonder
I'll add something.
some of your experiences around this are, and your own.
So I remembered an exercise we did in a conference, and it was soul gazing. You had to gaze into somebody's soul through their eyes for 5 minutes, and I can't remember if it's 5 minutes or not. But some people found it really excruciating, and that resisting the connection because then you feel vulnerable. Um, but also I want to add, besides the connection piece, spirituality links with two things that are connected: purpose and meaning. So once you have purpose, almost everything else falls into place. And I'm on a coaching platform, and all the requests are, oh, I need to find meaning in my life. I need to find purpose in my life. So there is a lot of loss of meaning and purpose in today's society. People feel a bit alienated, especially in the US. There is a disconnect between the work that people do and the meaning and purpose. And people ask themselves, yes, the money's good, but why am I here? And I'm not saying, there is one purpose. Your purpose can change in life. You could, it's kind of like the fork in the road. So, that picture book that, if you go on page 6, then you end up in page 35. And so it's not like there's a fixed purpose, but regardless of what the purpose is, you have to find it
Yeah.
and it can evolve as you evolve.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if some people on the call today might be open to sharing some of their thoughts around finding purpose and meaning as they relate to spirituality. Um I see Heather's joined the call. Hi Heather, another fellow Chico person here in Northern California. Um so it's interesting that in your coaching work on this platform you're noticing a pattern here of people wanting to find meaning and purpose. I wonder how does that show up? Can I ask where you're at, which is on the other side of the globe from where I am, in Amman, Jordan. What might this look like there in the city of Amman if you were working with an organization or
So I find some level of truth to Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
uh,
You know, people here are struggling to, I mean, in the US, it's the same. People are struggling to put food on the table, pay the bills, they have to use credit cards, etc. But I feel that society needs to reach a certain level of development where the meaning part shows up. That need for self actualization or self transcendence. So, unfortunately, Jordan is not there. We're still at the lower levels of survival. Uh, I think that's the case in a lot of third world countries, unfortunately. That's why you don't find existential philosophers in the global south. You need to reach a certain level of affluence where you're like, oh, okay, I reached this affluence and still there's no meaning in my life. But if you've not reached it, then you're like, oh, I need to reach that level of affluence first.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. Yeah, it's a good point. Um, yeah, there's a lot to think about here with in terms of spirituality and leadership. Might there be another theme that relates to this or chapter that was in this edited anthology that is interesting to discuss on this call?
Well, my co-editor wrote a chapter titled "Leading from a Place of Oneness,"
Uh-huh.
uh, and it was using the concept of interbeing that Thich Nhat Hanh talked about, which is that intersubjective. I don't want to use overly academic language, but it's that feeling the in between two people, that connection. Uh, Martin Buber used the term "I thou," and for those who don't know who Martin Buber is, he was a Jewish mystic. I think he lived until the 60s or something. And he wrote this book called I Thou. And uh, he defined two things: um, I thou relationships, where you're operating as two human beings and the God is in between you.
Uh,
That connection that I mentioned. And then I its relationships. So you're treating people as objects. And this is where people lose meaning when the organization treats them as objects versus when it treats them as I thou. The leader treats everybody as I thou. And the connection is through God, spirit, whatever you want to call it. That's the spiritual organization or whatever you want to call it. I think one of the major issues for organizations today and leaders, like, how is my organization treating people? Am I dealing with them as objects, as it, or I'm dealing with them as human beings? Or the Hindu, everybody's God. So am I dealing with them as if they are God, just like me?
mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's part of this discussion about this has me thinking about how so many people that I know, including myself here, have left traditional work roles for the very reason of not wanting to work and within organizational structures that where you feel a little bit like a cog in a machine. It can be dehumanizing, almost like you have these human relationships and there's some sense of flourishing in your work and meaning, and then maybe the rug's pulled out under you because there's some organizational change, and all of a sudden you're a number or an object, right? And I notice a lot of people moving into solopreneur work or consulting work or starting their own business, especially as I come back to the United States 1 year ago now, just seeing kind of the aftermath of COVID. And I saw that overseas as well in a few different countries during COVID, where people were reaching a level of burnout in their traditional work and making decisions about their career that took them in very different directions because they wanted that sense of autonomy and control. And I would say meaning and purpose in life. And so I'm wondering, have you observed some similar trends around you? I mean, anecdotally, just kind of observing maybe not so much in Amman, Jordan, but in the network of
The whole what do you call it, the what did they call it, the mass resignation, the great resignation. I think part of it was people were fed up, but what I see, what's really saddening is that people said, oh, during the new normal, we're never going back to the way things were. And 5 years later, things are back to the way they were for a lot of people. So it wasn't the change that it wasn't the reset. I mean, people use the term reset in a way, but whatever. It's just like we're back where we were almost 90%. Uh, things have not been the major shift where organizations became more humane, treated people as people, not as objects. It's the same system. The system is so resilient. People have predicted the death of communism, and it happened like 60 years later. But with the death of capitalism, people have been saying, "Oh, it's going to die. It's going to die. It's going to die." But it's very resilient.
Yeah, I do. I hear what you're saying, and I think a part of me is thinking that these systems are so complex and that there's only so much we can see, and maybe on the surface it can look like over time not much has changed at all. And yet my sense is actually that there is quite a lot of change occurring that's not yet visible. Like maybe because of all the structural inertia of the government and systems having a lot of inertia that they're just rolling. To change that is going to take a long time. And so, but I feel like, especially having just visited Prague and learning about Václav Havel's life and how over time, he wrote about the layer of crust. It can be seemingly dry and like nothing's happening, but beneath the surface, there is water and movement and erosion occurring. And then all of a sudden, one day, the people that you think are telling the truth or lies, there can be a switch and then a transformative change that brings about something that did not exist before at all. And so my sense is that that is happening here where I am in the United States and in California, and but also I feel like on some global levels as well, because we're more globally connected now through various technologies and relationships. Um, but I also can relate to the sense that we're back to where we started or not much changed. Um,
I mean,
I
there is something that changed. In 2016, Mariam Williamson ran for the elections, the Democratic nomination. She got 1%, but that's actually significant. It shows there is something. There is a feeling that around spirituality. Um, the current president of the U.S. I mean, he has nothing to do with spirituality, but somebody like President Obama, for example, even though uh, I mean, his faith was important for him, and he didn't impose it the way Trump. I mean, you could argue Trump is not really religious, but so there could be change. I think, as you said, there could be stuff happening beneath the surface. Sometimes, like, systems appear to be resilient, and then all of a sudden they collapse. Uh, so it could be that phase change. You know, the the I don't know how to describe it, but it could happen.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, well, I see we are at time. There's so much more I would want to discuss with you, especially related to this last topic in terms of like different powers of the universe playing out through us. I'm really interested in autocosmology right now, reading Dr. Brian Thomas Swim's work and others in this field, because I feel like this has shown up some of these concepts as well in our discussion. So maybe that's a later discussion. But for now, I mean, maybe we should just close down and come back, and we're going to be using this live discussion, the recording, to co-author a Substack post together. So
Yes.
yeah, Anything final you wanna share? I see we have a comment here, Mohammed.
Nice.
Oh, it's from Heather. Just a comment. I feel that you're saying about finding meaning and how she's she says she's always placed, Heather, such importance on her work being personally fulfilling and purposeful, but it is rare to find a workplace that reciprocates this totally. Yeah. It is life changing to experience a supportive workplace with emphasis on connection and encouragement, encouraging personal care and growth. So glad you're working to put these concepts into the world. And Joyce says, wonderful discussion and so much to think about.
Thank you.
Yeah. I do want to say, in response to Heather's comment, yes, I do think it's rare that organizational leaders and organizations take on such an endeavor to promote personal wellness and well-being in addition to whatever their work is about, producing a product or service in the world, but also trying to invest a lot of resources, time, and money into creating a culture of care. And I do think it's life changing. And I feel like it has powerful ripple effects in the world beyond maybe the scope of a small organization. Um, would you agree, Mohammed? And any other final thoughts around this?
I agree. And my final thought is, yeah, we didn't get to explore everything. There's so much to talk about.
There is. Maybe on our next live call someday in the future, we actually get out of the office space and maybe into a practice or a tea group or something more a bit experiential on the live call. I
Yeah.
think that's fun too.
Yes, definitely.
All right. Well, Mohammed, thank you so much for joining this call with me. I look forward to a further conversation and writing with you. And so wishing I could take a field trip over to Amman, Jordan right now and have some tea with you.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope so.
All right. You come out and visit us in California, okay?
Yes, yes.
All right.
Hopefully soon.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Take
Okay.
care, Mohammed.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining.